Today we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. My idea for this show was to invite guests and get the conversation started, to take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. And we encourage our listeners to look within themselves to take decisive action to make a positive difference. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. I'm your host, Bill Myers, and today we are venturing into a topic that I'm as interested as anyone to explore. And so today's title of the show is Black Men and Fitting In. And my guests today are Mr. Alan Jones and Mr. Phil Coleman. And Phil will be joining us in just a moment, but Alan is here right now. And I want to set up this show. Black Men and Fitting In seeks to explore the idea of what a Black man is, who decides and by whose definition. This in-depth discussion with Mr. Alan Jones and Mr. Phil Coleman are two Black men who have expressed their feelings as outsiders and culturally disconnected. So this show seeks to examine the personal and professional life experiences, stereotypes, perceptions, and feelings, whether real or imagined, on what it is to be a Black man in America. And so my guest that is with me currently is Alan Jones, and Alan is an American of African descent who grew up in a multiracial, multicultural environment almost from birth. His father took his mother and himself to England when he was just 2 years old. And since then, he has been spanning cultural barriers and learning about himself and the world he lives in. So please help me welcome my special guest today, Mr. Alan Jones. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Appreciate that.
So I want to share with the audience how I came in contact with Alan. And as you recall, one of my very early shows was with a good friend of mine, Mr. Thomas Norman DeWolf. And we were talking about his background and his learning of that he was a descendant from the largest slave trading family in U.S. history. And from that, we also learned that he has committed himself to dealing with racial healing full time. And the organization that he is executive director of currently is called Coming to the Table. And so Tom has been talking to me about Coming to the Table for quite some time. I mean, about 10 years now. And I had expressed to him just before COVID hit my desire and interest to perhaps create a chapter of Coming to the Table right here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And then, of course, COVID hit and everything stopped. And so then he sent me an email and said that they had started an online virtual Coming to the Table chapter. And so I was eager to get involved with the activities of Coming to the Table. So I joined right on in, and it was through that connection and my involvement with Coming to the Table, the virtual group, which has members of all geographies involved, that I met Alan Jones. And we happened to be in the same little subgroup breakout groups. And through those breakout groups, there were pretty insightful conversations and dialogues. And as a result of that, we connected outside of the confines of Coming to the Table. And in those discussions is when he expressed certain thoughts that he had sort of lightly touched on during the Coming to the Table meetings. But then when we had an opportunity to speak directly with one another, he was able to expound on that and share his thoughts and feelings about this idea, which actually formulated the concept and idea of this particular show, because I realized that this is an important dialogue and one that is shared by a number of people. So Alan, I want to first again welcome you once again on the show, but I want you to sort of tell us, fill in the blanks on your bio to the extent that you are associating with this idea of not fitting in, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want you to be able to share in that, at this time. So
Sure. Like I said in the bio, my dad, when I was like two and a half, took me to England. But before that, he was a choir director in Canada. I live in Detroit. So Windsor in Canada is right across the border. And he was a choir director for a Catholic church in Windsor. So from the very beginning, I was multicultural because I was crossing the border almost every week to be part of the choir. And then he won what they call a Fulbright scholarship and studied in England for a year. And so he took my mother and I over with him. And so again, I'm in a different culture by the age of 2.5. And even while there, it wasn't just the British culture. We ended up living in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. So my sense of expansion and being part of a multicultural environment grew. Subsequently, my dad decided to send me to a boarding school in England. So I spent a lot of my, quote, formative years as a teenager in a boarding school in England. And when I came back to this country, it was a shock, a cultural shock, because a lot had happened in the 7.5 years that I was there. And I just didn't know where I fit in. I had a British accent. I spoke with British idioms. And so I wasn't people weren't quite sure what to do with me. I wasn't, quote, black enough for some people, and I wasn't white either. So that began my journey of, well, where do I fit in? And it's been a process.
yeah, and it seems that you not only in your early developmental years, that experience that you had when you came back to America and you're faced with where do you fit into this scenario, but also then career wise, I believe you had expressed that has followed you into that. You mentioned that you are in the IT world of.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I didn't realize it till recently, but next year I'll have been writing code for 50 years. So when I started, the languages that we know today, or C and all the things they talk about Java, hadn't even been invented yet. Things that we take for granted, having a computer in your phone, weren't there.
Right.
And I was there from the beginning. I did a lot of stuff, but at the same time, there weren't a whole lot of African Americans in the IT world. And the more I delve into it, especially in this country, the more I found it's a very closed world. And so I was very often the only Black person in the room, very often the only Black person in the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that feeling of where do you fit in just kept following me.
Yeah. Well, Phil Coleman has joined us. Welcome, Phil.
Hey, Bill.
I want to now introduce you to Phil. Phil Coleman. Phil is passionate about what he is currently doing from a humanitarian perspective. Little did he know that his life experience as a professional musician, pro racer, engineer, and business owner was preparing him to take on the task of designing water purification systems for thousands in dire need of safe drinking water around the world. Well, that's a pretty healthy little skip through your bio that obviously lands us to where we are today. But as I had said to Alan, I think it's important that you set that stage and articulate, because what had happened was I had met Alan in coming to the table, as I mentioned before, and within, I would say, a week or 10 days, I find myself in a conversation with Phil Coleman. Now, our mutuality was centered around both of us being musicians, and it had to do with a music opportunity opening up. And from that conversation, I shared with him that the pandemic had led me into this podcast. And so, in the midst of that, then again, we start to go a little bit deeper, and he then shares with me a very similar perspective as Alan. So I would like to, Phil, for you to just sort of set that stage and share with us the beginnings and that environment that leads you to a place of feeling like you do not fit in.
Okay. Hi, Alan. It was kind of interesting. Alan and I have a very similar background. I've been in IT for 40 years myself. I worked for Digital Equipment Corporation and IBM, and as a field service engineer and world support engineer, and then into field service management. And we kind of went down the same kind of path because I've been everywhere I've gone within digital and IBM. It's been kind of the similar path. I've really been the only Black in that environment. But I know we're here to talk about how we started, which I'll do. But Alan, you and I can kind of talk together offline sometime. And I'm from Detroit as well, so we have a lot of similarities there. But I grew up in Indianapolis on the south side of town in an area called Fountain Square. And in those days, back in the, telling my age, but back in the 60s, we were actually the only Black family there in that particular area. It's not that many there now, actually. But so I grew up with predominantly, mostly my white contemporaries. Mm-hmm. And so we had really no problem. I really didn't see color at all, because all my friends, we played cowboys and Indians. There's a little creek over there we call the Dead Man's Path. And, we all used to make these ropes and go across the water. So we didn't see any of that. Later on in life, I kind of saw a little bit, what was going on with King and Kennedy and so forth. But primarily in that particular environment, it was just us having fun as kids, and 1 through 8. And I got to high school, and it was certainly I would say a major cultural shock, because here are my Black counterparts. And I can remember to this day, some of the sisters used to call me Jive Coleman, and that kind of stuck with me, Jive Coleman. And you have no idea how something like that would impact you. And then some of the guys, they were wearing Florisham and Stacey Adams shoes, and all I had was some Hush Puppies and some blue jeans, which I was perfectly happy with. But I got talked about quite regularly. And but what was more interesting was the fact that I thought I was going to be embraced by my Black friends, I thought, but they did not want to associate with me because I was too jive. I talked a little bit different than they did, and the association was very limited. So it was an interesting phenomena in the lunchroom at this high school. All the whites were on one side of the cafeteria, and all the Blacks were on the other side of the cafeteria. And so I remember the very first day I went there, I really didn't know where to go. Should I go with it would associate with some of my white contemporaries or some of my Black contemporaries? But what happened was, no one really wanted to associate with me because the Blacks called me Jive and Square, and I wasn't fitting in at all. And I tried to hang with some of my, again, white contemporaries, and no, that was taboo then, because, I was not supposed to be in that area. So I ended up sitting by myself. So that's kind of gives you kind of the background there, Bill.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into this because, again, I think we're being polite here. And I really want to get down with the get down. So let's hold on to that thought. That's a good jump off place. But we got to hit a commercial break right now, and we'll be right back in just a minute. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires. I'm your host, Bill Myers, and today we're exploring Black men and fitting in. And we'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talents, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, billmyersinspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email becomeahost@inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We're back, and you're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and today we are exploring Black men and fitting in. And my subtitle for today's show was Perspectives on Identity. And that's really what we're talking about today, because we are dealing with two separate gentlemen who have expressed the idea that they did not fit in. And I think they're very different sort of circumstances. Alan, I'm going to ask that you pick up here and go a little bit deeper, because you share a lot of information. You oversimplified the move from England, because this was a whole thing from you that had to do with, as you talked about your father and the different activities that he was involved with, and and opera and all. I mean, it's a whole bigger piece. And so I really want to, I think that for, in all fairness, for us to really get closer to this identity issue, it would be good to flesh that out just a little bit more.
Well, it's interesting because, the more I think about things, the more I talk about things, the more memories hit me. So I read a book a long time ago about the ways that African Americans survived. And, one of the ways was you assimilate, or you defy, or you just hide. And in our family, there was sort of like a combination of all three. And I didn't realize the mixture until I got older. I was like 30 or 40 before I realized what part was assimilation, what part was defiance, and what part was what. But it went deeper than that because I also discovered that even my own family background was a mixture of cultures. My father was from the Deep South. My mother was from Barbados. I didn't realize till I was almost 50 that those two cultures were different. But they informed how I dealt with things. And so it was that sense of who am I? Because I loved hip hop. I loved LL Cool J when he first came out. But at the same time, I loved Bach. I mean, I was raised on Bach and Brahms and Beethoven. I wanted to be a composer, a serious classical composer. But at the same time, I love jazz. So there's that constant feeling of I'm not white and I'm not Black. And one of the things that we've talked about that really hit me this week especially is the word and. I don't want to be Black or white. I am Black and white. And that and is important because there are parts of me that were raised in the British system that I will never give up. There are parts of me that were raised in the Catholic system, which is traditionally a European-based religion. I don't want to give up. But at the same time, I love gospel. I mean, I got to see Andre Crouch twice. You know, I love that side of me. So, and that bumps into the acceptability of what white people expect you to be like. So they're okay when you talk about Bach and Brahms, but they're not okay if you want to bring in some Andre Crouch. And so, you know, that constant, by the same token, you know, if I'm talking to some Black folks, you know, they, like Phil said, they sort of look at you funny when you talk about Bach. Now, so long as you talk about, you know, some good music and what they decide is good music, you're okay. But so you constantly have this, you know, what we call it, the code switching. But when you're in that middle ground, you get tired of code switching.
Okay. So Phil, you want to weigh in here? Because I want to sort of create equal space here. This is navigating the three-way conversation, and then I will jump right on in because I got some things to share with the both of you.
Okay.
So when I mentioned a polite thing is, I meant to sort of throw a little bit of a rock in our conversation because I want to have a serious conversation about Black men and not fitting in. Right now, I just don't want to. I mean, the niceties and stuff, that's fine. But we got Black people, we got white people, we got real issues. So I want to make sure that we're not dancing too much around the periphery because we don't need to be. I just want to make sure we hit the subject. You know what I mean? I mean, so and again, that's not a crack at you. I just am saying it's okay for us to say white and Black because that's what we're talking about in a lot of these cases. So, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know I was being political. Or
Oh, no, it wasn't just you. I just want to accelerate because 55 minutes goes pretty quick. So I want to make sure that we get to some of the real subtopic pieces, you know, during this. So, but anyway, go ahead. I will hush my mouth.
Okay. It's kind of funny. I'm telling you, Al and I, our paths are very similar. Growing up in that era, I was exposed to country music. I mean, that's really all I knew, you know, and other than when I got a little older, my father and brother played a lot of jazz, but that really wasn't kind of my thing at that particular time. And I even actually got dogged out by my own brother for liking country music, but it was my environment. And so again, I get to Manual High School. You're talking about raw. It was pretty daggone raw that particular time because I just wasn't that hip kind of person. But the only thing that really saved me was James Brown. I really liked what he did with some rhythms and so forth. And but I still even had a conflict then because I was listening to a country station in Nashville, but in the same city, there was another station called WLAC out in Nashville, and they played R&B, and then you had the country stations playing that. So I kind of went back and forth, but it got into a area that was really uncomfortable because some of the white folks were looking at me as if I was a fraud playing country music, and I said, man, where are we at here? This is what I grew up with. It was my environment. And so, I had to learn how to talk hip, which I actually failed to do, but playing music, it actually helped me to blend in with my white contemporaries and Black as well, because I was pretty daggone good on those drums. And so that kind of helped.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is interesting because, okay, so as we talk about this, I was working under a premise of on Black men and fitting in, mostly the referral point of fitting in with other Black people. And so, I mean, because fitting in, Black men fitting in, I mean, Black men in mass are Black men. I mean, so the fitting in as it relates to trying to fit into white America, has its own challenge, but that's one that is shared by every Black man. What I'm talking about is when you say I don't fit in, then there's something here that would suggest to me as a Black man that you are having an issue mostly, and I'm not Black enough. So, and what that is. And so I want to challenge and really inquire about how do we see, what is a Black man? I mean, because I think that we may have framed in our own minds, perhaps, again, I toss this out for conversation, what our idea of a Black man is. And so now that forces us to engage stereotypes. Stereotypes are not found in zero truth. They are actually found in some truth, but then exaggerated and taken on to a whole other level. So I think that in the identification of what a Black man is, and one self being, Alan or Phil, you or me, saying, well, I don't really fit into that. Okay, but what is the that? And who's defined what that is? Because we must be able to recognize that throughout time, of course, we got the hipsters, the Cab Callaways or the James Browns or the contemporary culture as we know it, LL Cool J, whatever. We've got our contemporary culture that's always changing and morphing depending on hairstyles, the beat of the music, so on and so forth, that has that. So that's always the in group, the cool kids or whatever you want to call it.
I don't know about Alan, but for me, I'm probably ruined because I don't feel like I fit in with anybody. I don't know if it's the media having a certain perception of what a Black man is supposed to be, or some of my Jewish media controlled entities. They have a whole different perception of white folks. And I'm just kind of vacillating somewhere there in the middle. But for example, I book bands at various places in Detroit and Indianapolis. And when I go to some of the Black clubs, I get a lot of haters. I don't know if I sound different or what it is, but I don't know if it's jealousy or what, but they are offended that I'm in that kind of position. But the managers put me there because I'm articulate enough to keep things moving and get things organized. But inside me, there's this feeling I've got to watch everything that I say because I'm going to be perceived as thinking I'm better than somebody else. And that's not the case at all. I just see myself as a separate individual trying to make it through life like everyone else.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Alan? What do you think about that? We're coming
I
up
was,
on.
I was gonna say, you know what, that's so real because, I am me. I don't know, and I really did never think about what a Black man is defined as, because I see so many different kinds. Well, all I know is my experience is the same as Phil's. I will walk in a room, and because I speak a certain way, Black folks don't want to talk to me. I have my barber and I were talking. I've been doing it for 20 years with my barber. He lost friends because we would talk in the barber shop and they didn't like what we were talking about. So he lost customers because they didn't want to be around us having a conversation. And part of it was the idioms of the speech patterns that I use. I'm like, what am I supposed to do about that?
So that made them uncomfortable, is what you're saying. Uncomfortable.
Right.
And they chose to take their business elsewhere. We don't want to be bothered with whatever y'all talking about. Okay. All right. So okay, I got you.
Can I add something to that, Bill?
Okay, we got a break. We're at a break, but yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, real quick. I'm involved with a community outreach program, and oftentimes I have to call some of the homes. And let's say a kid answers the phone and asks to speak to a certain person, and they'll say, "There's some white man on the phone," and that just blows me away. I don't sound white or Black. I just sound like me. But it makes you very conscious of where you're at and your surroundings.
Right. I got you. Well, hold on to that. We're going to come back and tap on that just a little bit more. I appreciate you guys being with me today. We're discussing Black men and fitting in right here on Bill Myers Inspires on the Inspired Choices Network. We'll be right back in just a minute.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both Black and white, Bill leverages his background, talent, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, billmyersinspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and today we are discussing Black men and fitting in with my guests, Alan Jones and Phil Coleman. I want to share a couple of things with you. I guess the main thing that I wanted to make sure that we tackle is the idea, again, as you both had expressed to me, the idea of fitting in or feeling like a misfit or not culture acceptable in this or that. There's a number of things that you have said that I just want to sort of pull together and frame just a little bit. Number one, you had mentioned you mentioned music styles as a point, and Phil, you had mentioned that you listen to country music and that, and I want to double back to something. So I'm biracial. My mother is from a proud tradition of rednecks from Arkansas. These were guitar pickers. They were proud hillbillies and whatnot. And so you say any of those things to them, that was a badge of honor. So they weren't running from it. And there's a significant amount of racism that also comes with that package. So that's where she is from. My father is African American and was born here in Indianapolis and served as a police officer for 50 some years. Now, the irony is that my mother loves to listen to Aretha Franklin and so on and so forth, and Nancy Wilson and all that, coming from the Deep South. And my father, the African American member of the family, loves country music. My mom can't stand it. She's like, turn that stuff off. But as you're talking about, that was something you were raised with every morning, getting ready for school as a child. It would be the country music station blasting away. So I'm as familiar with Conway Twitty, Dottie West, you name it, Loretta Lynn, Glenn Campbell, we can just go on and on. Merle Haggard, so I listened to country music every morning before I went to school. I can't say it was my choice, but I got very familiar and comfortable with the music, with the idiom of country music and the artists and the songs, and appreciated it quite a bit. Now, after school, I grew up in a Black neighborhood. So, but after school, I would tip down to my buddy's house 2 doors down, a Black family. And these were my brothers. Their father passed away of a heart attack in the front yard when I was a very small child. And they became my brothers from that moment forward. And we would, be pulling out, the Parliament Funkadelic and the whole other school of thought. So those things coexisted in my reality in the course of a day. So those things, but again, as I was listening to you, I'm sort of relating to that now. In the interest of that, again, we've got totally different, racial, cultural background scenarios. I guess my point is that I don't think that when we walk through this life and we think, for instance, that we are truly alone, that's a very dangerous place to be. And so I always feel it necessary to try to assist in uncovering the truth. And the truth is, I already know that none of us are alone. There are big pieces to our narratives that are actually shared by many, many people. And so, again, as you were saying that, and you've already made common connection, Phil, you've made common connection with Alan on some of the points he was making. I want to take that a step further. I was speaking to my primary care doctor a few hours ago, and I happened to mention that I was doing my show today, and my topic was Black men and fitting in. At which point, and he is an African-American doctor. I would imagine he's probably, 40, 45 or something like that. Anyway. And then he says, sort of, me too. And then started sharing from his experience of growing up in Catholic school, attending a Catholic university, getting his medical degree, and all of this, as he's framing through, he's outlining all of these times and this sort of isolation or feeling disconnected from the larger sort of culture, as it were. He feels like he didn't fit in. But then he went on to tell me that there's a posse of professionals that he was in school with. One is a lawyer, one is a military officer wanted. So he started identifying these various other African Americans who also feel that same sense of they are by themselves. What the irony is, you're telling me about community when you say that.
Well, I want to jump in here a little bit.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It's not so much, it's more isolation than aloneness. Because I mean, yeah, obviously Phil and I have these similar experiences, but Phil and I haven't met till right now.
Right.
And so the thing is, you can have common experiences, but if you are not in community physically, socially, you feel the isolation. And I think that's what we're talking about. It's not and that I think is the hard part. And for me, the more I look at this, I think, especially for African American men, we are raised in isolation. Sometimes we're raised in isolation for protection, because a group of African American men get together, and all of a sudden you have police people following you. Walk down the street by yourself, you're going to be followed. You walk down with 3 or 4, you're going to have a group of cops following you. So in some respects, that isolation is maybe a survival technique, but there are consequences to that.
Yeah, there's consequences both ways, wouldn't you think? I mean, one argument is safety in numbers, and so then the other one is, but numbers can cause
not for us
problem, right? So I mean, and that's what's so interesting about this topic, is because there's several different, and that's why I said, perceptions of identity, because and now that also comes back to who the perceiver is, who's the person that's reading into this situation and what are they seeing, becomes really the deal. But I that is valid. It's interesting too, because as you mentioned IT and you mentioned Bach and many of these types of things, some of these things fall under a categorical place of uncoolness in our school culture, right? So none of the cool people are talking about that. None of the cool kids were talking about marching band. You know what I mean? And none of the cool kids were talking. So they were in a whole other thing. But also when you mention where you landed in the world of IT, and I wanted to get into that here. First of all, let me address the notion of the cool and that sort of culture thing, which, if what we're talking about is our early developmental years, i.e. K through 12, there is a strong case to be made that maturation process through that gauntlet of things is traumatizing and has a lasting effect on the rest of our lives. And so I want to be very clear about that, because it very much does, because those early experiences start formulating your thought process, your awareness, you know what I mean? And then that helps shape your worldview from that point forward. I mean, we learn how to walk, and then we just continue doing that same foot after another for the rest of our lives. But we learn that very early. So if we learned how to walk sideways, we'd probably spend the rest of our lives walking sideways, right? So I just wanted to share something about this. There's a couple of really key points. Number one is being the only Black in the room. That's a big deal. And that is, again, shared by many. And that was one of the things that my doctor had shared, that he shares with his buddies as well, that in the circles they run in, they are oftentimes the only Black in the room. And that makes a huge difference too, which helps contribute further to that sense of an isolation, if you will, because our first instinct when we walk into a space is to look around. Our scan is to find something, where's my posse? You know what I mean? Where are my people? Whether that's color or could be some other qualifiers. I mean, if I look over and see other bass players in the room or something, it's like, oh, there's my posse, there's my tribe, if you will, because we're always seeking that connection. And so I think that's part of the eye scan. It's not so much always just a color issue, but that certainly factors in pretty heavily when we're talking about Black men and fitting in. If we're the only piece, so much of the time that can be very difficult to feel that. Go ahead, Phil, you were about to say something.
Yeah. There's a segment of the population. There are thousands and thousands of people like Alan and myself, and I would venture to say that most of them have developed their own survival strategy, and that strategy is based on probably performance, a byproduct of the worst of times, which is the isolation that we're talking about, can yield some positive benefits. I clearly remember 10 years old going to Indianapolis Raceway Park. My father took me there, and I really loved drag racing. And he took me up to one of the teams, and they said, he asked, I'd like to get my son involved in this. And the man didn't really mean any harm at all. He just said, sir, there's just not going to be any opportunities for colored people. And for some reason, that stuck in the back of my mind. And I just never forgot that. And so as time went on, I was able to get a job. Once again, I kept that in the back of my mind. And eventually, I was able to perform my own professional drag racing team. And we won the biggest event in drag racing history, which is the U.S. Nationals, which is actually held right in Indianapolis. So I'm sure if you would check with Alan, everything he's done to take away some of the hurt, he's probably has actually pursued other interests that have kept him motivated, that has kept his mind active, so he didn't have to deal with some of the hurt of not knowing which way to go. So you kind of turn inside and you kind of just develop your own thing. That's why I got fairly decent with music. That's why I'm an inventor. That's how I'm involved in music. It's not because I really wanted to, it was just a protective mechanism to hide the isolation and the hurt.
Right, so it can create an overachiever. In fact, because you've got something to prove at all times. You got something to prove, and that proof and that drive that can happen there is the only way you can validate why I'm here. If I'm the only one, but this is why I am here, right?
That's it.
So yeah, I feel that often. Again, to take this story all the way back so that you guys are aware, I wanted to play music from time I was about 6 years old, and I want to play the trumpet and so on and so forth. It was time for me to be able to audition to become a member of the band and to get to play the trumpet, and they denied that and said I had no musical ability.
Mm.
And not only did that was their assessment, it was a test, it was then repeated, even after the parents come and meet. And I just really couldn't accept that. I was not believing that. I had no investment in whether or not they were telling the truth about whether I had the musical ability or passed the test. But the one thing I knew that I had was a very strong desire. And I have learned throughout my life that I'll go with the guy with a big, strong desire over a natural talent any day, because he has something to prove. And just given the opportunity, watch him fly. So I know exactly what you're talking about. So, 45 years later, I'm still, that thought in the back of my mind that fuels me is, you have no musical ability. Music's taken me around the world several times. You have no musical ability. So I've never forgotten that. And so, but it definitely fueled my work ethic, because if there was anything I wanted to do was to prove these fools wrong, definitively wrong. So that was fuel in my tank for doggone sure. So So I think that that's really, really important stuff. We're going to take a quick break here and we're going to come back and wrap this up. But you are listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and today we are covering Black men and fitting in. We'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both Black and white, Bill leverages his background, talents, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, billmyersinspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and today we are having a discussion with Mr. Alan Jones and Phil Coleman on Black men and fitting in. And I think, to your point, Alan, a lot of times that notion of, yes, you can have sort of community and sort of connect dots, but at the end of all of this, I think what we're really zeroing in on is how these experiences make us feel.
Yep. I just wanted to chime in because the two of you were talking about the inspiration of being at the isolation. And I have to tell you my final story, which goes back to what you said. I'm currently full-time employed for the first time in my 30 years with a company, because being in IT, I had to pick and choose and trying to survive. But 5 years ago, I was hired at the age of 61 by a software company. And when my manager talked to me after they hired me, he said exactly what you two said. He picked me because I had the desire and the strength, and also I was an overachiever. But that overachievement came exactly from what you both said, this feeling of isolation. And so, I took it I always used to tell people, the best revenge is success. So for me, being in a software company at 66 and keeping up with folks who are, I'm older than some of their parents, is the victory.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and congratulations on all fronts, because whenever you can sort of stick it to them, I'm in the back, man, with, pom-poms, full band, cheering this whole thing on. Because that's the point, is that I refuse to allow someone else to define who I am and what I am capable and not capable of, because I've yet to meet a wall I could not climb. So I love a good challenge, and life has certainly been that way, for me, and as it is for you, and as it is absolutely for everyone. So I thank you, gentlemen, for joining me in this conversation today, and we'll come and visit this some other time, but we are getting ready to sign out of here. You are listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and we are talking about Black men and fitting in. And we thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Thank you for spending your afternoon right here with us at Bill Myers Inspires. Remember, we're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Inspired Choices Network. Remember to take time this week to take a breath and look within yourself and figure out how you can make a positive difference in this world. Spread the word, and we'll see you here next Friday. Have a wonderful week.